looking for greater. I'm praying every day for greater. I'm reaching for it. I'm reaching for greater, y'all. And I'm believing for greater.
But he moves right from salvation to a direct rebuke. Look what he says in verse 6. I marvel that you are turning away so soon from him who has called you in the grace of Christ to a different gospel. And that word marvel, it means I'm amazed. I'm astonished. I'm shocked. I'm dumbfounded. I'm surprised. In our language, we would say, I'm just blown away. I'm shocked that Paul says that you have sit under my preaching and my teaching all this time, and so soon that you have turned from the true gospel to another gospel. You see, brothers and sisters, the message of the Judaizers was that you got to have faith in Christ, but you got to also be converted to Judaism, and you got to be circumcised, you got to keep the law, and then you're saved. And Paul says, when I heard that and you followed after it, it shocked me. I was blown away that you turned away so soon from him who's called you into grace to a different gospel. Look at what he tells them. Number one, he tells them, listen, as Christians, you don't need to be unstable. That's the first thing he tells them. Don't be unstable. He said, you are turning away so soon. Look at that phrase, turning away. What does turning away mean? It means to change your place, change your position, change sides. Metaphorically, it means to denounce your citizenship and declare that you are a citizen of another country. It's like being a turncoat or a traitor or a deserter. He says now, you sit under my preaching, you sit under my teaching, and now you have become a traitor and you have gone off to follow a different gospel. And he said, I'm shocked by it. And what he's saying is that these Galatians were unstable. And can I tell you something about unstable people? Unstable people have no staying power. They start out wide open. And it doesn't take long before they fizzle out. And the Galatian church is no different from the church in the 21st century. You got members who come in the front door and go out the back door. You got folk who walk down the aisle and say they want to be saved, want to give their life to the Lord, and then they fired up for about 2 or 3 weeks. And then after that, they right back out the door. You don't see them no more. Unstable. Stable means that unless there is some unseen circumstance, if Sunday morning is my worship time, I'm going to be in the church. Not only am I going to be in the church, but I'm not going to be just a pew sitter, but I'm going to be involved. I wish I had somebody. I'm going to contribute to the church. He says, now, don't be unstable. But then he says something else. Don't be immature. Watch what he says. He said that they were turning, verse 6, to a different gospel. Now, there are 2 Greek words in the New Testament for the word different. One Greek word means another of the same kind. For example, if I say to you, give me another cup of coffee, that's another of the same kind. But then there's another Greek word that doesn't mean another of the same kind, but it means another of a different kind. And that's the word he's using here when he says you've turned to a different gospel. In other words, you have turned to a different gospel altogether. In other words, the gospel that you turn to is not the gospel that I've been preaching and teaching to you. Because the gospel that I've been preaching to you is a gospel of grace. But you have gone back into the bondage of the gospel of the law, feeling that you've got to be good enough in order to be saved. that you got to do enough good works in order to be saved. Let me tell you something, children of God. You're not saved because you do good works, but you are saved, and because you're saved, that's the reason you do good works. The reason you come to church is because you're saved. The reason you give your tithes and offering is not to be saved, but it's because you're saved. The reason you give yourself in ministry is not to be saved, but it's because you saved. He said, don't be immature, because immature folk are gullible. Whenever there's a more popular preacher in town, that's where they go. Whenever there's a better choir in town, that's where they run. Whenever there's a church that doesn't hold anybody accountable, do what you want to do, whenever you want to do it, that's where I need to go. You see, immature folk will run after anything where there's no accountability and that it seems popular. Whether it sounds truthful doctrine or not. He said, don't be unstable, don't be immature. But then he said something else. Don't be ignorant. Watch what he says in verse 6. I'm amazed that you are turning away so soon from him. Now, in my Bible, that H is capital. So that means he's talking about who? Jesus. I'm amazed that you're turning so soon from Jesus. You turned from him who has called you in the grace of Christ to a different gospel. Verse 7, he goes on to explain it. He said, which is not another, but there some who trouble you and want to pervert the gospel of Christ. He said, there ain't no other gospel. He says, other than the gospel that I'm preaching to you. He said, but you have gone after another kind of gospel. Do I have a witness here? And can I tell you this morning that is what's wrong with American Christianity today? We've gone after a new gospel. This new gospel of prosperity. Let me give you 10 ways to get rich. Let me give you 7 ways that you can get your breakthrough. No, you see, this gospel today is no longer about conforming to Jesus Christ. No. You don't hear any of these preachers today, these televangelists talking about a lifestyle that is similar to the life of Christ. I wish I had somebody. You don't even hear most of them talk about hell anymore, as if hell doesn't exist. But if you don't think hell exists, miss heaven. It's all about our happiness. You see, that's the aim of humanism, is about our happiness. But Jesus didn't call us to be happy. He called us to be a servant and to be faithful. Paul said, I'm shocked. I'm amazed that you who have followed my teaching, that you exemplify this ignorance. Because it don't make no sense to leave the gospel of grace in order to embrace the gospel of the law. I don't know about you, brothers and sisters, but I'm glad that God gave me grace. Because if I had to be saved by keeping the law, by doing everything I'm supposed to do perfectly, because I have broken every law. Do I have a witness? Because, don't look at me funny, y'all have too. Because the Bible teaches us to break one of them is to break all of them. Yeah? But some of us have been, we bought into the pseudo kind of legalism. Our foreparents who didn't have the theological and biblical understanding of the scriptures that we do now. But some of y'all remember when we were parents and how they would tell us that if you take a drink of alcohol, you're going to hell. That'd wipe out most of it in here. Okay? If you smoke a cigarette, you ain't saved. If you play cards on Sunday, you're going to bust hell wide open. And if a woman wore pants to church, she was the biggest sinner in town. And if a woman wore makeup, she was not saved. But can I encourage babies, wear your makeup. Whatever you do, put you some makeup on. I mean, a home, but some of us need it, baby. Just a little bit, just a little bit. A little dab will do you, okay? But I would rather have a gospel of grace than a gospel of law. I'd rather have a gospel of grace that said we are saved not because of our own human efforts, but because of the efforts of Christ that he exemplified on the cross. When he died, he said, "It is finished." Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So the wrong message will lead you the wrong direction. So don't be unstable, don't be immature, don't be ignorant. But then don't go back 30, because you will be a disappointment if you do. Paul was astonished at how he had preached the true gospel to the church in Galatia. But then here comes some other popular preacher who comes along, preaches a different gospel. And they left the gospel that Paul had been preaching and started embracing a gospel of the law when he preached the gospel of grace. And Paul expresses how disappointed he was, and so he warns them in the strongest language of the New Testament. When you read verses 8 and 9, look at the strong language he uses. He said, "But even if we are an angel from heaven, preach any other gospel to you than what we have preached to you, let him be accursed." Notice here, Paul includes himself as well. He says, even if I come to you and you hear me preach a different gospel, if those who are with me, if they preach a different gospel, he said, even if an angel came down from heaven and preached a different gospel than what you've heard from me, let all of them be accursed. Now that's strong language, because that word accursed means to be given up to destruction, to be assigned to hell. So that's the harshest language that you'll ever hear in the New Testament. And Paul repeats it in verse number 9 to give it emphasis. He said, as we have said before, in other words, I said it one time, but I need to make sure you hear me. So I'm going to say it again. He said, now I say it again, if anybody preaches another gospel to you than what you've received, let him be accursed. See, Paul is serious here. And he's showing just how disappointed he is. He's angry. But his anger is legitimate. Because can you imagine what would have happened to the plan of salvation if the Judaizers had won? That means that you and I would be assigned to hopelessness, and we would be assigned to helplessness. Because there is nobody in here that would have been able to live up to the law. Do I have a witness? There's nobody in here that could ever be good enough to be saved. Huh? Because all of us in here have a tendency to sin. Some of us, we done already sinned this morning. Some of us sinned since we've been in here. And so I'm glad that my salvation is not based upon what I do and what I think, but it's based upon the fact that I gave my life to Christ and I allow him to live in me. Huh? Because you can't keep the law. But not only was Paul legitimate in what he said, but Paul says that out of love. Because the very fact that Paul was willing to confront the Galatians says that he loved them. Because he loved them enough to confront them with the truth. Right. And there's an old saying that says, the wounds of a friend are better than the kisses of an enemy. In other words, I'd rather hurt my friend's feeling than to have my enemies to come up and kiss me and not mean it. Huh? He says, because if you love somebody, you will tell them what they don't want to hear if it's for their benefit. In other words, you're not afraid to tell them the truth. Now, you tell them in love, but you'll tell them the truth. And this is all Paul is doing. He's just telling them the truth. He said, don't go back. And I came to admonish somebody today. Whatever your issues are in life, don't go back. Somebody today is being tempted to go back into some relationship that you know that's outside of the will of God. Can I just tell you, don't go back. So somebody's tempted to pick up a habit that God has freed you from years ago. But can I tell you, whatever you do, don't go back. Right. Do I have a witness here? Listen, the enemy is always going to come at you and say, you remember what you used to do. You remember what you used to be. Didn't you have some fun? But can I tell somebody that old lifestyle that God has freed you from, don't go back. Listen, if whatever you're involved in, if it doesn't add value to your life, if whatever you assigned to, if it doesn't draw you closer to God, don't go back. All right. Because you will be disappointed with yourself. Anybody, have you ever found yourself in a situation that you thought you had freed yourself from? And once you found yourself back in it, you ask your question, how in the world did I get back here? Is that right? And you find yourself disappointed with yourself because you went back. But I thank God, lastly, don't go back. Because if you're a child of God, you want to please God. And that's why I'm glad that Paul didn't end the paragraph angry. But he ends the paragraph telling them the aim that he was trying to get at. Watch what he says in verse 10. He says, for do I now persuade men of God? Or do I seek to please men? For if I still pleased men, I would not be a bondservant of Christ. He said, listen, I ain't trying to win no popularity contest. He said, I could easily give you a false doctrine just like the Judaizers, and everybody here would love me. He said, but I ain't trying to please man. He said, I'm trying to please God. And so Paul says, I'm telling you, don't go back. And can I tell somebody that ought to be your consuming desire this morning? That whatever you do in life, that you want your life to please God. It's because you want to be just like Paul. You want, when you come to the end of your journey, you want to hear the Lord say, well done. Do I have a witness? And in order to do that, you cannot be concerned about pleasing men. You cannot be concerned about being popular. But at the end of the day, your desire ought to be, I want my life to please God. Paul said, I'm trying to help you here. Because Paul says, even though you may have strayed away, even though your situation may look desperate right now, Paul says still it's not too late to turn your situation around. And can I tell somebody that that's the message of the gospel of Jesus? And the message of the gospel of Jesus saying, even if you did go back, it's never too late to turn your life around. I believe I got some witnesses here, because you made some mistakes even after being a Christian. You've fallen down even after being saved. You got on the wrong track even after you've given your life to Jesus. But I'm a witness this morning that you still can be free again. Do I have a witness? Even if you strayed this morning, you can be free again. Even if you missed the mark, you can be free again. Even if you ain't living in bondage right now, you can be free again. Do I have a witness here? Even if you've gone back to a life on the street, if you give it over to the Lord, you can be free again. Even though the enemy may have beaten up on you, I want somebody to know you still can be free again. Because the God I serve is a God of another chance. Do I have a witness? And if you're here this morning and you're like the commercials that said, I've fallen and I can't get up, I got some good news for you. Come here, David. David said, I fell, but I thank God that his grace got me up again. David said, when I fell on my knees and cried out, created me a clean heart and renew within me a right spirit. Do I have a witness? Can somebody be a testimony? Look at your neighbor and tell your neighbor, no matter how far you've fallen, and no matter how hard you've fallen, no matter how low you've fallen, tell somebody you can get back up. Do I have a witness? Can I get somebody to speak life this morning and shout, no more chains holding me? I made up my mind, I won't go back, because I'm free. I'm free. No more chains holding me. My soul is resting. It's just a blessing. Praise the Lord. I'm free. I said I'm free because the God I serve is the God of another chance. I'm free, and I made up my mind. Since I'm free, I'm not going to let the bondage of sin bring me back into his slavery, because I've decided I'm going to follow Jesus. Look at your neighbor and tell your neighbor, no turning back, no turning back. The world behind me, the cross before me, no turning back, no turning back. If nobody joins me, still I will follow. No turning back. Do you have a made up mind? If mama don't go, if daddy don't go, if sister don't go, if brother don't go, if my wife don't go, if my husband don't go, don't hinder me, because I made up in my mind I'm going all the way with the Lord. Shout yes, yes, yes. It's you.
I'm looking for greater. I'm praying every day for greater. I'm reaching for it. I'm reaching for greater, y'all.